Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 6th Annual Energy Storage Summit. We're delighted to have you back for the 4th and final day of the event. So I'll just give you a quick roundup of what we've got in store. So first of all, this morning we have our keynote presentation from UK Export Finance that will be presented by Julian Lynn, who's the Regional Head of Middle East and Asia Pacific. And then we have a couple of panels, so around co-located projects and where is the best market for them, along with financing for merchant projects and the landscape for that currently and the future. And then we also have 2 case studies. So a slightly shorter day, but I do hope you enjoy all of the sessions and get involved and ask as many questions as possible. Remember to put your questions in the chat and we'll get them answered. Now for this session, Julian is also joining a panel at 12:30 around financing for projects. So if you don't get a chance to ask your questions in this session, then you can ask them later on. So don't worry about that. So as always, I'd like to start with a very huge thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us make the event a great success. So we have Trina Storage, our technology and industry diamond partner, our platinum sponsors Wärtsilä and EDF, our gold sponsor Huawei, silver sponsors Arenco Group and Sungrow Power. And then we have our wonderful bronze sponsors, Centrica Business Solutions, Carbon Neutral Energy, Lion Tamer, Saft, Siemens Gamesa, Chromalox, Highview Power, Watlow, White & Case LLP, and Leclanche. Then we have our supporting sponsor Honeywell and our exhibitors Ness and InAccess. Not forgetting our media partners who have also helped make the event a great success, and of course our attendees and our speakers throughout the 4 days. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Julian, who will introduce his session to you. Hi, Julian.
Thank you, Lucy, and great to be at this event, a fantastic event, and certainly, as you say, the next frontier for the whole energy story. Great to be doing the presentation. I think we're going to do about 20-25 minutes to run through a few slides about UK export finance. As Lucy said, my name is Julian Lynn. I'm a regional head within the origination side of UK export finance, looking after the Middle East and Asia Pacific. So both big, busy areas for some of the challenges and opportunities we talk about today. So great to meet you all, and thank you for joining this session. Lucy, if you could kindly move to the next slide, please. So a little bit about UK export finance. What is it and who are we? It's an export credit agency, and most industrial countries have one of these, which sit within their government, and it's the job of an ECA to promote and support exports from that country through typically offering lending and guarantees in support of exports. We were the oldest, established to start the First World War, and I would think today probably among the largest. I think our business that we'll underwrite for this year will put us into probably the largest ECA, certainly in Europe, if not globally. The general mandate, as I said, beyond supporting exports, is to complement rather than compete with the private sector. So we look forward, we work alongside banks to effectively increase the overall appetite and capacity for lending to a project or a market. We've done a number of award-winning projects recently in renewable energy, in Islamic financing, in innovation, and in supporting UK exporters at this tough and challenging time through COVID and emergence from Brexit. Thank you, Lucy. The next slide, please. We do have, and I think it's important to highlight, a global remit, and we are open for business in over 200 markets, and we're typically active in 70 of those markets. We have a strong focus on SMEs, and we're very keen to work with any SMEs in the supply chain. Even if you're quite deep down in that supply chain, we can recognize your export, even though you're supplying a business, which in turn may supply another business before an export takes place. And so we have products that are designed to support those businesses. And as I mentioned earlier, an unbelievably big year for us last year, coming into our year end March of about £8.5 billion of underwritten business. And last year, as I say here, 77% were SMEs as businesses we supported. I would just like to make one last point. It's probably fair to say that, yes, in the global magnitude of exports, this may not seem a huge amount of money, but it is worth bearing in mind that if we didn't support this level of exports, these are export contracts that may well not have happened. So we are creating opportunities that might not have happened. Thank you, Lucy. Next slide, please. So it's a big appetite, and we have from the Treasury about £50 billion of capacity, and we have underwritten to date about 37 billion. There's obviously an amount running off, but there is a £13 billion remaining capacity for global business. Next slide, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about why UKEF is important for you potentially and for your buyer. We cover all sectors, so clearly renewable energy would be in there, and beyond that, storage solutions. We've looked, for example, at off-grid storage solutions in remote power solutions for Africa. So we're open for all sectors. We recognise the services as well as the goods component of contracts, the profit element of contracts, and the innovation and IP of aspects, all of which are strong features of the UK economy. I've mentioned that we're open for 200 countries. We offer up to 60 local currencies, and that's been a key value when you're offering long-term financing to a country that does not want to borrow in dollars or foreign exchange. In renewable energy solutions, it's arguably our best offering. We offer a credit period of up to 18 years. We have global banking relationships and network, which can also help bring in additional finance. Our guarantee is 100% unconditional, and that makes it a little bit rare in the ECA world. A lot of ECAs, it's only 95%. They work more like insurances. So there's some qualitative distinction that make the UKEF guarantee particularly attractive to commercial lenders. What we ask for, which we'll talk about a little bit, is that in any contract we're expected to support that we can identify a minimum of 20% UK content. Beyond that, we're very flexible, as I say, to look at structures, whether they're deals that involve a sovereign borrower, a project financing, a complex structuring, or an Islamic financing, or any of these innovative financings, receivable solutions, whatever they may be, that may be necessary to pull the transaction together. Thank you, Lucy. Next slide, please. So here is the picture of the UK government, and you can see that UKEF sits within the centre of the UK government, particularly at this time as the UK government emerges from Brexit and COVID, and big emphasis on renewing and developing new export markets and opportunities. And we work very closely with the UK export network and sector teams, the DIT sector teams in the UK, covering all the key important sectors, but also the Foreign Office network of embassies and commercial staff, and our own dedicated network of international representatives, as well as our own domestic ones, to target overseas buyers and make sure we can deliver and lead with financing offer to encourage them to purchase from the UK. Thank you. Next slide, please, Lucy. This is our international network. As I mentioned, it's a global remit. It is being expanded. We have 14 or 15 so far. We're recruiting more in the Middle East and the Far East. We have strong representation in Africa and Latin America, but very keen to hear about the geographies that some of the participants in this event are seeing as being active, possibly in Eastern Europe, all the Far East, all the Middle East, where storage solutions are likely to be required. Thank you very much. Next slide, please, Lucy. So I mentioned earlier about how we would provide guarantees and lending to support an export. We do that in two ways. The first way is by targeting the overseas buyer, to say to them, here is financing for your project. You're on very attractive terms, as long as you buy from the UK for some of that. And then we have support for exporters themselves to enable them to bid and get paid and be able to perform under the contract. So the two work together in providing an umbrella of support and in a huge incentive for buyers to buy from the UK and for UK exporters to sell to those buyers. And the buyer credit facility is the main feature. It's a guarantee that we provide a lender for long-term lending. But probably of more interest to some of the audience here today would be the short-term products, which look for support that businesses may have in issuing bonds, ensuring their contract, and in having working capital that they might need to act as a cash cushion while they execute a contract and wait to get paid. Thank you very much, Lucy. Next slide. This is our domestic network of EFMs. Building on my theme I just mentioned of support for short-term businesses, we have this national network of dedicated export finance managers who are able to sit with UK companies and go through these products with them and their banks to tailor for those businesses support from UKF to help them go ahead with those businesses. So there are about 24 nationally, and the regions are set out there, and you can see on our website further information on accessing that network. Thank you very much. Next slide. I talked a little bit about the products, probably to go into those a little bit more in terms of how they help the notion of winning a contracting, fulfilling an order, and getting paid. So winning the contract, clearly, as I mentioned, the buyer credit is the incentive from the buyer to look to buy from the UK. The working capital facilities, the bond support facilities are designed to encourage the UK exporter to bid for the business and know that if he does bid for the business, that he will get paid and that he's got cash liquidity to fulfill the order. And then finally, in the unfortunate event you don't get paid or your bond isn't called, we have insurance policies which work where the private insurance market would not provide sufficient cover. And this is a very, very key message because generally speaking, British exporters are underinsured compared to our European counterparts. And we've seen even quite good markets, suddenly there may be a failure to pay, and many companies do not have export insurance and end up in big trouble because they've gone and done work on a contract and they haven't been paid and they've got no sight of being paid. So that's a very important thing to think about when exporting. Next slide, please, Lucy. Okay. One way we talk about here clearly is how we bring a UK exporter network together with an overseas buyer. And the greatest example of that is what we call our supplier fair product and supply chain support. So we work with all of the UK exporters and we look into the supply chain very carefully to see how far down in that supply chain we can look to provide our support. And we bring those companies together with big international buyers and borrowers so that they can see that supply chain and we can identify the UK content that is involved. And you can see that it's actually a bit of a tip of the iceberg, and the supply chains, particularly in some of these more complex sectors like renewable energy, are long and deep. And so we're keen to move down that supply chain, but also to recognize that by helping the top tier suppliers, we can pull through very small businesses that are right down that supply chain, and they too can benefit. Next slide, please, Lucy. The short-term support, which I think may be more relevant here, is what we talked about, the export working capital scheme. We typically, in this case, would work with a business to identify where they saw a cash shortfall. And then with the bank, we can offer up to 80% of the working capital amount, which in turn could be as high as the value of the contract itself. So our guarantee would go to your domestic bank, whether it's Barclays or NatWest or whoever, and we would provide that guarantee to enable that liquidity to be provided. So the bank would take 20% of the risk, we would take up to 80% of that risk, thereby expanding the bank's appetite to support the business by a factor of 5. One of the second thing is the bond support scheme. Again, this does come up a lot. It may not be directly relevant for some of the audience here, but it is a very big issue in posting and issuing bonds for tenders, for performance, for advance payment. And this can be a real problem. It's a real cash soaking up thing that sometimes can affect a business. So again, just like the working capital, we provide a bond facility that allows the bank to issue the bonds on behalf of the company with a guarantee from us up to 80% of that bond value. And this is working together. So we're seeing a release of pressure on cash flow, working capital, bond support. And then lastly, we have the export insurance side, which I mentioned earlier, very important area to cover, which is essentially the failure to get paid under a contract for whatever reason, save for a failure to perform by the exporter themselves. So it's a broad mix of insurance protection from a number of political and economic events that might happen. And that, of course, might include things like COVID and sort of things that we didn't expect to happen in the last year or so. Next slide, please. Additionally, we're innovating with new products. This is a recent facility which is designed for exporters that is not contract specific and is designed to help those exporters do a bit of investment, if you like, and preparation in order to tender for an export market. And it's designed for smaller businesses, but it is designed to make it less restrictive and allow the business to, as I say, make investments, make upfront payments that it might need to make in order to tender for business. Next slide, please, Lucy. This is a high-profile product we've offered. It is recently emerged because of obviously the challenges big businesses have had with the COVID crisis. And we have gone in there to provide large-scale financing, in contrast to the small one, for businesses. To note, I think, are JLA and Ford, where this is an investment into EV technology. So this really is investment rather than exporting, but with this very important test that the potential for exporting is there. So this may be comparable or similar, for example, in energy storage companies looking to invest in technology and capacity in order to tender for opportunities for storage solutions overseas. Next slide, please, Lucy. Finally, I talked about the supply chain, very deep and complex, and this is a facility designed to work with a variety of facilities that access the whole of the supply chain, very much bespoke to that supply chain and to the bank arranging it. But it allows for a synchronization of payment flow down the supply chain trickle, if you like, or down supply chain stream, which prevents delays, uncertainties, and allows a greater calibration of cash flow for the businesses that are in there. Still very new, again, so bear with us, but it's a big effort that we want to try and make in order to help businesses fit with an ever more complex international supply chains that we come across. Next slide, please, Lucy. Thank you. Clearly, and it's great to be on this event and really delighted to see what's happening here. But as we all appreciate, this is a pivotal time I think recently described as a generational moment for the switch to sustainable energy, clean growth. And it sits at the heart of government strategy in export promotion. And UKEF is playing its part to do that. We have just recently closed our third offshore wind project in Taiwan. We've done 3 of these. We were able to support the UK supply chain in that, even though the UK side of it was really quite deep down in the technology there. And finally, to demonstrate and support our efforts, we have a £2 billion fund where we can lend as UKF directly to clean growth projects, which covers a huge area of smart technology, smart cities, recycling, energy efficiency, social infrastructure, and carbon reduction activities. So it's very important, and the UK government is absolutely committed to this and to promote this globally. Next slide, please, Lucy. Clean growth is obviously clearly based upon existing clean growth, mainly in renewable energy, solar and offshore wind, but also I think in the new technologies, clearly of energy storage, carbon capture, and further technologies that might emerge, for example, in clean tech. It's a coordinated approach, so it's designed where the UK government supports technology and innovation and investment right the way through to the financing of exports as and when these arrive. Next slide, please. Clean growth, I mentioned here, this is an example, and we're seeing, for example, a lot of mass transit systems and rail solutions, waste management, as well as green buildings. And clearly the next generation of energy efficiency and energy storage will be important for us to support. Next slide, please, Lucy. Okay. I'm going to talk about this final case study. I think that's probably it, and bring it to an end from my side. I personally was involved with the underwriting of this project, took huge personal satisfaction. It was our first underwriting of an offshore wind project. Difficult to believe it was very recent, but it was. And it involved a number of technical, commercial, and legal regulatory risk hurdles that we had to understand. But we came into this project, I think, as one of the leading ECAs, only 4 export credit agencies involved. We worked with new Taiwanese contractors and lenders, a global network, including Siemens Gamesa for the turbines, and a number of leading world-class Danish, European contractors who were able to use UK expertise in the construction of this extraordinarily rapid rollout of offshore Taiwan wind projects. And it would be really interesting for us to see, and I think it's going to be a debate point, how the next wave of these projects, which won't be tariff supported and would need to optimize their energy delivery, could look at storage solutions and floating offshore wind. But the technology and the pace of technological change, for example, in turbine size, is something to behold. But we were enormously proud to be associated with this, and one of only 4 ECAs. The other 3 ECAs, of course, had leading contractors that they could leverage into the project. We had to work very, very hard at the tier 2 and tier 3 supply chain level in order to get our sharp elbows into the project. So that's a quick gallop through UKF. I hope that's quite clear. I know there's a lot of ground covered there, but very happy, as Lucy said, to take questions, to follow up, and delighted to be on the call. Thank you very much, Lucy. I think that's probably me wrapping it up, I think, for the presentation.
Great, thank you very, very much, Julian. I think that was a great presentation. I think it's definitely very, very important for the industry to see that, you know, organisations, well, the UK government and organisations within them are, you know, offering support, particularly for SMEs. So I think we did. Yes, so somebody would like to have the presentation. Is that sure. Okay to share that afterwards? Great. So yeah, we will be sharing the recordings and the presentations as well after the event, so you can certainly look up any more details, and I'm sure Julian will be happy to be contacted as well. So I just had a couple of questions from my side whilst we wait and see if the audience themselves have any other questions. But just in terms, obviously you mentioned the Taiwan offshore wind project. I was wondering if you could, shed any more light on the types of particularly storage projects that you are, have either worked on already, whether it's kind of scale or size or geographical location.
Sure. The storage solutions we're typically looking at the moment have been the sort of micro solutions, which we've seen in rural locations, off-grid, for example, in Africa. So they've not been the scale ones we're looking at. And certainly from our side, really keen to understand where the industry is at in terms of that technology and markets where they see that opportunity. I mean, generally, we are passionate about supporting the sector. So if people are saying, well, look, to make a wind farm more competitive, we need to offer an integrated solution for storage, and that comes from UK innovation or UK companies, then we will be the first to get behind that. And, we understand technically there might be more of a risk, but actually commercially it reduces risk if we can obviously store the power and then provide it into the grid at a better rate and optimize the commercial. So there'll be some balancing. But I think for our learning for here today, Lucy, really is to understand the market as well and how we can support the businesses that you, as you say, are helping here with this event.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, just kind of touching on that, so obviously, co-located and, the opportunity for co-located projects and the markets that they are, being seen in, and the markets that they're sort of beneficial to at the moment or have a good business model is something we'll be discussing on the next session. So, not just solar plus storage, but wind plus as well. I think
exactly.
Something that is certainly coming to the fore a lot more. So we have one question from Paul. Is there a monthly, do you have any types of forums that you offer that the in terms of giving updates, I guess, about your work?
We don't. That's a very good question. I think we've got a fairly good website. It is a government website, so it's not the most rinky-dink thing. It's not as slick as the kind of things you guys would have. But no, I think the depending on what you're looking to do, the website is pretty good with what's going on. Today in the news type thing, it's called for UKF. But it really depends on what you're looking to do. We typically end up quite early on in our dialogue with people looking at associations. So we'd be, for example, work more closely with you, try and understand your businesses. What kind of information are they looking to hear from us? As you said, probably looking to work with, global energy providers about storage solutions. So, I mean, that's something we could look into.
Great, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Paul. And somebody else is wondering, so how advanced does a company have to be in terms of revenue or profits in order to get the support? I think that's probably quite a key question. Yeah,
it is a key question. It comes up a lot. And actually, as you said, we're in a time of tremendous change. And a lot of British businesses are innovating and they are starting. We're not at our best with startups. And because we are the UK government, we work for UK taxpayers, we have to work on a no net zero cost to the UK taxpayer. So arguably we have there are equity risks which a startup would and should take. We can come in quite early on if there is a project. And we've seen in the past small businesses develop a project, but they have an angel investor or somebody involved in the process who's prepared to come alongside and get that project commercialized. And we could look at it on that basis. Yeah, that makes sense. Again, hope that helps with your query. And just before we wrap up, so as I said, Julian will be joining another financing session. So this is a panel discussion. It starts at 12:30. So I think that will be another great time for people to get their questions answered. Obviously, that will be much more of 45 minutes of discussion and conversation. Just had one more question. So I thought it was really interesting, the supply chain discount guarantee that you mentioned. So I was wondering if you'd be able to tell us a little bit more about this. I know you said it's in the kind of early stages, and has that been impacted or accelerated by the pandemic at all? It's been, if anything, it's a creature of the pandemic, but it's been something we've thought about. But to try and understand, as you said, the needs of supply chains. very much bespoke, very much about what that supply chain looks like, either generally or for a specific contract, and then working with bank or banks to see how we synchronize it across payment across a number of suppliers. There is a specialist department within UKEF that looks at that, a very clever guy. So it's very much case by case. If there's someone who's saying, I'd like to know if that's something we could work with, then the best thing would be contact me and I'll put you in touch with this guy to try and see how it does. But it's designed to bring, as it obviously says, to the discount facility to allow a payment flow to operate right down the supply chain as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Great. Okay, thank you very, very much for your answers and for the presentation. I think it was, yeah, really, really insightful, really helpful. So we'll definitely be sharing it with the audience. And we look forward to having you on another panel shortly. Thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. See you soon. The next session will start in 15 minutes. And that's, as I said, all around co-location of projects. Thank you, everyone.